Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. It has been a very busy weekend. It's been a while since we went a weekend without any shows. We had our post-game shows, and last week we were doing college football playoff reveal show. We were doing transfer portal opening show, so it felt like we were just on top of everything. Taking a couple days off, man, a lot happens. So let us go down a few of the things that have happened before we get to some of the big ones. But let's talk about all that we're going to talk about today, because this is a big one. We got Pete Nakos with all the transfer portal intel that you're going to want. You know, what's happening with Walter Nolan, our number one player in the transfer portal? What's happening with Kyle McCord, the former Ohio State quarterback? Where is he looking? I think go big red. Very interested in what Kyle McCord's doing right now. We're talking to Jeff Goodman, a Field of 68, about Bronny James' debut. That's right, a little basketball. We know you love your schools. We're going to talk about a little bit of hoops going forward. This will still be very much a primarily football show, but I love college hoops too. So we're going to be talking about that. We'll also be talking about some of the other college sports because, again, we know you love your schools. So we're going to keep talking about them while they're playing sports that everybody's interested in. We've also got Justin Hopkins from ScoopDuck talking Dillon Gabriel to Oregon, potentially the most impactful transfer in this cycle. We'll see. There's a few more who want to vie for that title, but that will be a very interesting situation because, again, you think about what you saw from Dillon Gabriel at Oklahoma and at UCF, and you extrapolate that to what you saw Bo Nix doing in Oregon's offense, and it's very, very exciting. Oh, Buff Boulder City in the chat knows what I want to talk about, though. We definitely are going to talk about Coach Prime because Coach Prime hit the transfer portal hard for some O-linemen and had a nice weekend on the high school recruiting front. So we've got Buff Boulder City saying, "We coming, baby." That, of course, Coach Prime always say that. So we're grabbing Boo Carter and Walter Nolan. Woo, very interesting indeed. Boo Carter is a Tennessee commit that the Buffs are trying to flip. But let us talk about what Coach Prime has done over the weekend. It started Thursday with a commitment from Jordan Seaton, who is the number one offensive tackle recruit out of high school. He is a big one, not just physically huge, but big for a lot of reasons, because this is the type of player you need to build around, and they just don't grow on trees. You don't typically find an athlete like this in the transfer portal. Basically a plug-and-play type left tackle. Now, plug-and-play is a little hard to say when it's a younger player going into college and they've got to start right away. But he probably will have to start right away at Colorado, or at least will have a chance to start right away at Colorado. But the question is, who's he going to start alongside? And that's something that Deion Sanders has been very busy with this weekend. 4 commitments from transfer portal offensive linemen. He's got 2 from the Power 5, 2 from the Group of 5. Now, we don't know exactly what this is going to be. One of these is pretty highly rated. Justin Mayers from UTEP. He played left guard for the Miners. He's one of those that he was initially ranked a 3-star recruit coming out of high school, but our guy Charles Power has him as a 4-star in the transfer portal. So he's one of those Group of 5 guys that played well, looking to move up. He's committed to Colorado. Tyler Houston, he started at guard for Houston. He's a more traditional transfer portal story. He originally played for Texas, left there looking for more playing time, found it at Houston. He was a starting guard at Houston this year. He will be at Colorado next year. Khalil Benson was the starting right tackle at Indiana. He's from Mississippi originally. Tom Allen always had that connection. He used to work at Ole Miss. But he is on the move. He's going to Colorado. So a big guy there. And then Yakiri Walker, who was UConn's starting center this year, is headed to Colorado. And that, remember, Deion said, if the offensive line I have can't block, I will get new offensive line. And we said, I don't know if you can do that out of the portal. Well, he is going to try. He is taking as many of these guys out of the portal as he can. And again, like Jordan Seaton, I think is probably one of your 5 opening day starters, unless he's been completely misevaluated. And I don't think he has been. You saw Caden Proctor start every game at left tackle for Alabama this year. They're in the playoff. Caden Proctor had a rough start. It wasn't easy at first for Caden Proctor, but he got better and better. And by the time they played the SEC championship game against Georgia, he looked very good. So Jordan Seaton, similar level to him. And you heard Charles Power on Friday talking about maybe a more polished pass blocker coming out of high school. So that's a big get for the Buffaloes. And then you add, we don't know. Are they adding bodies? Are they adding guys that will contribute? The truth of the matter is we're not sure yet. We need to see them play together. Offensive linemen tend to, when they play together, chemistry matters. How do they work together? So we'll have to see. Phil Loadholt, the new offensive line coach at Colorado, remember, played at Oklahoma, played in the NFL. He's been an analyst at Oklahoma working under Bill Bedenbaugh, one of the most respected offensive line coaches in the country. Perhaps Loadholt can get these guys going, get them together. It is going to be a fascinating scenario to watch at Colorado, because that was the problem this year. You saw the hot start. Then you saw them kind of fall apart as the season went on. A lot of it was they could not block for Shedeur Sanders. And if they could block for Shedeur Sanders, they would have won some more games. Now, they went from 1-11 to 4-8. And that's a good move. That's an improvement in a very deep Pac-12. They now move into the Big 12, which I think is going to be a pretty good league. Will it be as good as the Pac-12 was this year? I don't know if it quite will be. But this is going to be really interesting to watch, because some of those offensive linemen that they got last year may also grow into the role. But that group has to get better. Offensive line, defensive line, they got to get better. If they can, and Shedeur Sanders has time to throw, you're talking about a team that can be good in the Big 12. Can they win the Big 12? I don't know. Utah's going to be really good. They're bringing Cam Rising back. Arizona's going to be really good. You expect possibly a bounce back year from TCU. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But this is where it has to get better. This is where the evaluations have to work. And once these guys start to play together, they've got to be effective. They don't have to be great, but they have to be effective, because you got to give Shedeur Sanders a little bit of time to throw. Now, I want to throw one more thing out here, because we mentioned at the beginning Jordan Seaton, who not a portal guy, he's a high school recruit. Big get. So after Jordan Seaton committed to Colorado, Josh Newberg, our guy, On3 Recruits. If you don't subscribe to On3 Recruits already, you need to. It's the YouTube page where Josh and our crew who cover recruiting talk about the high school recruits as they decide where they're going to go. So right after Jordan Seaton committed, Josh Newberg made a video, and it was 5 things that Colorado needs to do. Now, the first one was actually sign Jordan Seaton, because obviously somebody that sought after, people are still going to be coming after him until signing day. But he did commit on Undisputed. He seemed pretty all in on Colorado. But let's look at what number 3 was from Josh Newberg, or what Coach Prime needed to do next.
All right. Also, add Draylon Miller, the talented wide receiver, number 66 ranked player overall out of the state of Texas. He decommitted from Texas A&M about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago now. He's a dynamic pass catcher with elite speed. Need more guys like that on offense, and he's been to campus twice already this season. A lot of people thought when he decommitted it was going to be a quick switch to LSU, but that hasn't happened. And he's been to Colorado a couple times, and the Buffs look like they could be a very viable landing spot. Got to close on him, but there is a strong relationship.
Spoiler alert, they closed on him. Draylon Miller from Silsbee, Texas, 6 foot, 190-pound receiver, top 100 guy. He is going to Colorado. All of a sudden, the Buffaloes are shooting up our team recruiting rankings. Now, I see you guys in the chat. Walter Nolan to join Coach Prime, Lil Mark says. Buff Boulder, Andy, he got some big media line guys that are elite. Listen, I don't know if you watched a lot of Indiana football this year. Let's slow down on the elite talk. He got Jordan Seaton, who is an elite recruit. We'll see with the transfers. I watched Indiana play. I don't think you did. So we're going to see about that. UTEP wasn't great either. Also fired its coach. So let's not go too crazy yet, guys. But it is a good reason to get excited. It is a very good reason to get excited because that was the part you kind of wondered about. I said it a couple of times. When Deion Sanders had his "we're not an ATM" speech, that worried me. That told me, is your collective not in a position that you can get the kind of O-lineman, the kind of D-lineman you need to succeed? Well, if you can get Jordan Seaton, you're doing just fine. Offensive line, tough to build out of the portal. But Justin Mayers is a guy that a lot of teams wanted coming out of UTEP. He played very well. His PFF grade was very good. So they are doing well. They're competitive in this space. The problem is the teams that are really, really good get guys like Jordan Seaton, not maybe not ranked that high, but that kind of guy over and over again over a period of years. He's only been there 2 years. He's only been 1 year, really. So it is not that easy to do that. But this is a start. And getting Draylon Miller, again, another big one. So can they flip some more trenches talent? Josh Newberg thinks they can. So there's more offensive linemen out there, more defensive linemen out there that could potentially land in Boulder. So keep your eyes peeled on the flip watch as we get toward National Signing Day on December 20th. Keep your eyes peeled on the portal because it looks like Deion is going very hard right now. O-line, it seems like they've worked quick, and you had to work quick because if you look at the top ranked offensive linemen, interior and offensive tackles in the portal, a lot of them have already committed. They don't last long. It's not like some of these quarterbacks that go take a bunch of visits and they're out there for 2 weeks. When a lineman goes in the portal, you got to go. So they're moving fast so far in Boulder. We're going to find out what Deion Sanders can do with this group, but this is all very positive news for the Buffaloes as they try to rebuild that offensive line, which is the most important position group for them this offseason. All right, let us hit some other news before we talk to Pete Nakos and dive deep into the transfer portal and figure out where former Ohio State quarterback Kyle McCord might be going. Bronco Mendenhall back in college football. He was hired at New Mexico, places Danny Gonzalez. Remember, Mendenhall has been out a couple years. Mendenhall has been talking about he's ready for NIL, knows what he needs to do, knows how to handle it. It's an interesting question because missing the last 2 years means you've missed an awful lot on this front. The world's almost completely different than when he left Virginia. But Bronco Mendenhall has always been a very effective coach. He made BYU better. He made Virginia better. I suspect he's going to make New Mexico better. Very excited to see what he can do there. Another really interesting piece of coaching news. North Dakota State head coach Matt Entz headed to USC as the linebackers coach. Now, he is going to finish out the run with the Bison in the playoffs in the FCS, but he's leaving one of the best FCS jobs in America to go be a position coach, not a coordinator. Because remember, Jensen Lin is the coordinator at USC. So the last two North Dakota State head coaches, Craig Bohl went from North Dakota State to Wyoming. Chris Kleiman went from North Dakota State to Kansas State. Entz going to USC, but as the linebackers coach. But I do wonder, does this make him a faster riser if he wants to be a head coach in the FBS? I'd say he probably does. I'd say this is the way to go. He's at a Big Ten school now. We got to wrap our heads around that. USC's a Big Ten school. But this is the thing. You've had these coaches where the path was, work your way up to a head coach at some level, and then you can become a head coach. You jump another level. Like you go from North Dakota State to like a MAC school, and then maybe go to a Big Ten school from there. but that's just not how it seems to work anymore. You need to be the hot coordinator at a Big Ten or an SEC school if you want one of these big jobs, or at least you want to be considered for it. So perhaps that's the move he makes. Now, also you saw David Braun, and he just saw this, go from being hired away from North Dakota State to be the defensive coordinator at Northwestern. Pat Fitzgerald gets fired. Braun does a great job as the interim, and he's now the head coach at Northwestern. Like, he's a head coach at a Big Ten school. So if you're Matt Entz, you're looking at that, and the path seems pretty clear. But good luck to him and the Bison as he finishes out his time with them and then heads on to USC. Meanwhile, TCU looking for a new defensive coordinator. Stephen Johnson of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram reports that Joe Gillespie is out. It sounds like they're going to hire from outside. And this is one of those in college football, life comes at you fast kind of moments, because Joe Gillespie was the toast of college football less than a year ago. They were preparing to play Michigan. They upset Michigan in the Fiesta Bowl. They go to the national title game, and it looks like it's going to be all sunshine and lollipops for Joe Gillespie at TCU. And then this year, well, we talked about Coach Prime earlier. It started with that loss to Colorado, and then it kind of got worse. So he'll be looking for a new job, and TCU looking for a new defensive coordinator. Other transfer portal news. This one came between when we talked to Pete and when we went on the air. Bo Collins from Clemson, he has committed to Notre Dame. So Bo Collins, who fairly productive receiver at Clemson, but the problem with Clemson is they have not been able to recapture the glory days of T. Higgins, Mike Williams, Hunter Renfrow, Sammy Watkins, the list goes, DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, the list goes on. They had some incredibly productive receivers at Clemson over the past 10 years or so, and then it felt like the well kind of dried up. Meanwhile, Notre Dame really did not get much out of their receiving core this year. They would like to get more out of it. Perhaps Bo Collins becomes one of those productive receivers at Notre Dame. Now, the question is, who will be throwing him the football? We don't know quite yet. I don't think it's going to be Kyle McCord, but I think we have a pretty good idea about where Kyle McCord is narrowing it down. Let us talk to On3's Pete Nakos. He is deeper in the transfer portal than anybody in the country about Kyle McCord, Walter Nolan, Juice Wells, and all those guys that everybody wants in the portal. Here's Pete. We are joined now by Pete Nakos of On3. Pete is the transfer portal guru here at On3, and it has been a very busy weekend for the portal and for Pete. How we doing?
It's been fun. It's been good. I'm doing well. How are you doing, Andy?
Doing good. So you woke us all up Monday morning, the day the portal opened for most of the population, with the news that Kyle McCord was entering the transfer portal. You wrote over the weekend that he was making a visit, and it is to another Big Ten school.
Yeah. Yep. He is going to be at Nebraska this week. And one of his favorite targets, Julian Fleming, he's going to join him.
Wow. Very interesting. So now, are they a package deal? Do we know that? Or is that just they are buds and they might take some trips together?
I have heard nothing yet that makes it suggest they're a package deal. But I think the thought, right, of Kyle being able to link up with one of those top targets at Ohio State, I would imagine that only sweetens the pot for both of them. And I mean, not a shot at the Nebraska wide receiver room, but Julian Fleming, right, 5-star recruit, former number 1 wide receiver in the 2020 class. I mean, when you have Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka in that room, Julian could have been lost in moments sometimes, but I'm sure if he landed at Nebraska, I think he could really be a breakout star that we could see in the Big Ten.
Well, Jamison Williams will tell you that if you leave a crowded Ohio State receiver room, good things can still happen for you. So that is
very much.
But I was going to take a shot at the Nebraska receiver room, and thankfully you kind of did it for me. But I wasn't really going to take a shot. They had so many injuries last year. The way they ended the season, they just didn't have a lot of downfield options. So I would say as many people as they can get who can catch the ball down the field, who can make plays, would be a big deal for them. But let's talk about McCord a little bit. Who has he been looking at, and when did Nebraska enter the picture?
The offensive coordinator in Nebraska, Marcus Satterfield, flew to Columbus last week for a quick meeting, and it's worth throwing out there that Nebraska has by far been the most aggressive school when it comes to trying to find a quarterback on this market. I think they've talked to 5 now. But that meeting went really well. And then in terms of where else McCord's looked, I've heard some rumblings about Mississippi State. There was a thought that Syracuse could get in the mix, but I mean, the last 48, 72 hours, it's been all Nebraska.
Let's hear from Matt Rule from a few weeks ago.
Do you feel like you have to address the quarterback situation in the portal by you going into the portal?
I think that the portal for me is I either want to, if we go to the portal, I either want to get someone with at any position, someone with multiple years, I think is on caliber with the guys that we have, or someone who's instant impact upgrade, like someone who can make a difference. Make no mistake that a good quarterback in the portal costs $1 million to $1.5 million to $2 million right now. So just on the same page, right? So let's make sure we all understand what's happening.
So Matt Rule had been doing his homework before he said that, is what you're saying.
Spot on. Can I say one thing too? That's the funniest thing about that clip is he probably thought I don't know, Blake Shapen or someone like that was going to be his best target, but all of a sudden he's going to host Kyle McCord, who started against Michigan, 3 weeks ago? Kyle McCord was not on Matt Rule's radar when he said that.
What could he have been thinking? Because the Cam Ward smoke signals were out there, and
right.
I would think that's where that market setting number was coming from, because we didn't know. Well, Gabriel, the word was kind of out at that point too, that last week of the season. But yeah, it is very interesting how that works. So is Kyle McCord that top of the market type quarterback?
I can just tell you from my conversations I've had that Nebraska is going to be able to deliver the type of financial package that Kyle McCord believes he's worth, and probably is worth. And the 1898 initiative, the main collective at Nebraska, I mean, I don't want to say a storied history, but it's been well tracked that, Nebraska is probably in the upper echelon of the Power 5 when it comes to NIL collectives.
Yeah, your history can't be that storied when the thing you do only has existed for 2.5 years. But
it can't be.
But I will say, I've always thought Nebraska is Nebraska and Tennessee are the two places where if somebody were to come as a transfer and absolutely blow up, they become an instant superstar, and the NIL stuff, not just the preset, here's the deal we're going to make with you, but all the actual NIL stuff comes flooding in where you get endorsements and that sort of thing. So I do think that's one of those places where if you can be the one who lifts them out, right, you're going to be very well rewarded for it.
And then if you heard Matt Rule's comment again, right? He said instant impact. Kyle McCord will be an instant impact at Nebraska, and an instant impact, according to Matt Rule, is somewhere, it sounds like, between 1 to 1.5 million. That's how I interpreted it.
Well, congratulations to Kyle McCord, because that sounds pretty good, considering that there was not going to be a guarantee. And it's interesting because Matt was also talking about a guy who has multiple years. Kyle McCord doesn't. He's a junior this past year, no COVID year for him. So he is he's done after this year, assuming he plays, which we assume he will. So very fascinating road, because he could wind up again in the Big Ten and playing against a lot of teams that he's familiar with. And who knows, maybe Julian Fleming tags along as well. But let's move on to another position. A guy we talked about a lot last week, and that's Walter Nolan. He's the number 1 player in our On3 transfer portal rankings because there just aren't this type of defensive lineman available in the portal very often. He's probably going to be the only one of those this year. What's the latest on him?
Well, he was at Oregon this weekend, and just some early conversations, from my understanding, it went well. I think the one thing that's really interesting about Walter Nolan, right, is he'd be such a strong fit with Tosh Lupoy and Dan Lanning out in Eugene, By no means do I have any intel that says like a commitment is going to happen at any moment. But I just think that the Oregon and Walter Nolan situation just makes sense in so many different ways.
Yeah, that is. We're going to talk to Justin Hopkins later in the show about Dillon Gabriel and all the other stuff at Oregon, but Walter Nolan, I imagine, is going to come up as well. And you do think about their interior defensive line, where they're losing some very old and good players. That would be a nice step up, and Jordan Burch still there. That would be quite an athletic front if they were able to add him. But of course, there's a lot of other people who'd be very interested in him as well. It feels like it hasn't really slowed down much. There's still a lot of good players out there. One thing I want to ask you about is Juice Wells, former South Carolina. I'll go back. You go to Juice Wells' Twitter feed. The first pinned post is his James Madison Twitter announcement, and that he was transferring from James Madison. And I remember when he said he was transferring from South Carolina, it was weird looking at the I'm leaving James Madison and now I'm leaving South Carolina. But he's on the market. Visited Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin sent some funny tweets out.
Yep.
Who else is in the mix there?
So Texas is in the mix. Oregon is also in the mix. Speaking of Oregon, Tennessee was in the mix for a minute. Doesn't seem like that. The Vols are really in it at this point anymore. Talking to the OM Spirit, Zach Berry on Sunday, like Juice Wells was still in Oxford at like noon Eastern time, which is completely unheard of on official portal visits, right? A lot of those are like, I'm going to fly in, I'm going to have dinner with the head coach. I might handshake and say, have a great weekend or something. I mean, the portal visits are very different than high school recruiting visits. So to hear that Juice Wells was in town for so long is really eye-opening. Last thing is obviously reported Friday that he was going to Texas. I confirmed that with a source at Texas. Then things kind of just, I don't know if they broke off necessarily. Nothing about the relationship with Texas, but he wasn't in Austin this past weekend. So reported that Friday, and I still kind of see Texas really being in the cards there.
Yeah, it seems like Texas has been pretty aggressive in the portal period these past few years. But last year they developed kind of a, here's what we want and we know what we like more as they kind of figure. And Juice Wells does seem like he would fit what they're looking for in the portal. Like A.D. Mitchell was a guy they took out of the portal last year. Juice Wells seems very similar.
Yeah, I mean, there's Deion Burks in the works too at Texas. Like, there's other wide receiver names who have popped up, but Juice Wells has that track record in the SEC that it seems like a lot of teams want to kind of grab and run with in 2024.
Yeah, if he's healthy, he's really, really good. Another guy who it seems like everybody wants, Cam Ward, and we've talked about him, his journey, Incarnate Word in the FCS. He blows up there. He goes to Washington State following his coach from Incarnate Word, Eric Morris. And now where does he go from Pullman now that Washington State not really, Power 5 anymore?
So I put out an intel piece on Thursday saying that I had been hearing that there was a chance that Cam Ward was going to go to Miami this weekend. From my understanding, that did not happen.
Okay.
I think the really interesting thing, though, that you have to keep an eye on and remember when you're talking about Cam Ward is the NFL is still very much that was not just thrown out there to be like, hey, I'm not only going to the he is very much waiting for that draft grade. He could go to the NFL draft. The other thing that
go ahead.
Oh, the other thing I was going to mention about Cam that you have I don't think they want to rush this process, just like they're waiting on this draft grade. I don't think they want to make a decision and then find out the draft grade. So by no means am I anticipating something right away. And you keep hearing Ohio State plays he needs to take a couple of visits, in my opinion, first. And I think that's how it's going to play out.
Well, and Miami's an interesting one too, because when JD Piquel and I were talking about potential landing spots, I said, a place where they run something similar to the offense that he ran at Washington State, which would be USC, which would be, any of the old air raid coaches. Shannon Dawson at Miami is an air raid guy as well. So that would make a lot of sense. But yeah, that is the NFL piece of it is another one that I think we're just getting used to this now, where you've got these older quarterbacks who the choice is not just, do I go into the transfer portal? It's, do I go into the transfer portal, or do I go into the draft, or do I stay here? And we're seeing Cam Ward and Will Howard, it feels like, make that three-way choice.
Right. I mean, you look at Dillon Gabriel, right? Like he knew that he wanted to return to college. He made his decision under a week, right? I think if Cam Ward and Will Howard were sold on staying in college and finding a team, I think we may have already seen the decision.
Well, and Dillon Gabriel also, you know, I saw some tweets out there. Well, if he's so great, why isn't he going to the NFL? You can look at him and say, possibly his skill set doesn't translate that well to the NFL, but it translates very well to certain college offenses. So, like, he literally may be worth more to Oregon than he would be to any NFL team.
I think that's super fair. And I think the other thing, too, is, like, Dan Lanning, like, almost won the Pac-12 this year. You know, like, I know it wasn't the closest game in the world, but it was interesting. My point is, though, like, Oregon, with the 12-team playoff coming, is on the cusp of really cracking the playoff and maybe making a run. And I was going to mention, I didn't want to cut you off, but, like, I think we need to realize that, too, with Walter Nolan, right? Like, why not play next to Mateo Uiagalelei and like, try to win a Big Ten title, excuse me.
Yeah, there you go. It's hard to get your head around it.
And make a run at the CFP, and, oh, wait, we have a really good quarterback now. Like, Oregon is really going to be a fun place to watch during portal season.
Yeah, especially if they just get everybody. It does. And Dillon Gabriel, I would say, I don't know about how you feel. So far of the players who's committed, he feels like the most impactful.
Yes, 100%. I mean, and you have someone like Dillon now, like, maybe he's going to hang out in Eugene the rest of the month. I don't know that. But if you're doing more visits this coming weekend and Dillon's there with transfer portal recruits, like, that's going to play a factor. And you know, I mean, he's been at Oklahoma, he's been at UCF. He's going to know what to do to just help Dan Lanning build a good portal class.
Yeah, it's truly amazing how well they picked and chose out of the portal the last 2 years. Really has made Lanning's ascension that much quicker. Now, obviously, they still got to deal with Washington in the Big Ten, and now they get to deal with Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think you're right. If they hit on some of these portal guys that they really want, they could enter the Big Ten as a Big Ten title contender right out of the gate.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be really interesting, right? Big Ten media days and stuff to have these new teams. But also just like knowing that, like, wow, Oregon just like completely won the offseason. Like, what's that going to look like?
Yeah, and I think this is also something we need to get used to. We've seen it with teams that brought in good recruiting classes, but when you bring in a good recruiting class, you don't know when those guys are really going to start to pay off. And you know, even the really good ones like that 2013 Ohio State recruiting class, it absolutely was paying dividends when they won the national title in 2014, but you didn't know in 2013 just how good all those guys were going to be. And this type of thing, you kind of know right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, if things are going to click, they're gonna click because Dillon Gabriel in his 1 year. So yeah, that's a great point.
Well, it's been very interesting to watch, and we're still working on we're workshopping the name for we've had Nakos Grenades. I kind of like that one.
Yeah, wow.
When a portal person commits, I still think Nakos bombs work, but
yeah.
We could go around Pete, but the problem is Pete Thamel also breaks a lot of news in the college football space. So if we do a Pete something, people might get confused that we're talking about him.
And let's be clear, like, Pete is I'm still working to get there. I appreciate all the
Listen,
love,
Pete's a little older than you. You keep working at it. You'll be right there. But yeah, we'll go with Nakos Grenades for now. I'm good with Nakos. That's my favorite. It's a leader of the clubhouse. I am open to suggestions. Hit me up, Andy_Staples on Twitter. We can find, we're at Pete Nakos _ on Twitter. We can find the perfect one, but you just keep those coming and we'll keep reading them.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks so much, Andy.
Thank you, Pete. Pete Nakos, still workshopping the name for when Pete breaks transfer portal news, but he breaks so much of it, we'll have more opportunities to get that thing figured out. The big news in college basketball on Sunday, though, Bronny James making his debut. That's LeBron's son. And I think you assume, oh, it's LeBron's son. He must be awesome. Well, he's pretty good. But a lot has gone on between him getting to USC and him making his debut against Long Beach State on Sunday. So we're going to talk some college hoops right now. And this is going to be a fairly regular thing on the show. Obviously, this will still be a mostly college football show, but like I said earlier, we know you love your schools. And so we're going to talk about your schools with all of the things they do. We're going to talk about multiple other sports, but obviously college hoops we want to get into because this is going to be dominating a lot of the headlines. I actually think college hoops, because of NIL, has become easier to follow than it was before because it's not all the really good players just pop in for a year and then leave. You see guys staying longer. You get to know them. You kind of understand it. It feels a little more like college football in that way. So we'll talk a little Bronny James with Jeff Goodman from Field of 68. We'll also talk about Arizona, which looks like maybe the best team in the country. And we'll talk a little Purdue and Zach Edey, who is one of those players who we've now gotten to know over the years and still one of the best players in the country. Here is Jeff Goodman, who is the best in the country. We are joined now by the great Jeff Goodman, the Field of 68 podcast empire. I know everybody was up listening to Field of 68 after dark on Saturday night after a huge night of college hoops. But Jeff, we got to talk first about Bronny James, his debut. This is the one. So this is our first college basketball segment. We're going to get everybody kind of broken in.
All right.
We'll go with the one that everybody's Googling.
Yeah.
How much did Bronny James play? How much did he score? Let's talk about Bronny James' debut for USC in a losing effort to Long Beach State. Congratulations, Dan Monson. But Bronny, it's been such this whirlwind. You know, he's because of who he is, he's a very famous recruit. He signs with USC, cardiac arrest in July, and now he's finally able to get on the court. What did you see from him relative to what he looked like as a recruit?
Yeah, I saw him a bunch, over the last few years, and he got progressively better each year. First time I saw him, I'm like, all right, is he going to be more than just kind of a mid-major guy? And he turned himself into a, player that was a McDonald's All-American, might have gotten a little bit of the edge there because of his dad's name. But listen, this kid knows how to play. That's the bottom line, is he got that from LeBron. No, he's not, 6'8", 270 and super explosive, but you know what he is? A high IQ, ball moving, terrific defender who doesn't make mistakes, who plays with incredible poise. That's the one thing, Andy, when you saw him in his debut, you said, like, this dude just he knows how to play. He's not going to be rattled. Now, he missed the key free throw down the stretch.
Yeah. So did everybody else on USC, though.
Yeah. He wasn't the only one. He was not the only one. But he was really, to me, he looked like he belonged in his debut, after which he like you said, listen, he had cardiac arrest. They weren't sure he was going to play again. He's off and not able to do a whole heck of a lot. Misses the first 8 games, misses a ton of the preseason, and he looks like he belongs. So he's only going to get better. However, here's what I'll say. And I've said this before. The expectations placed on him are way too much and always have been. And I just hope this slows down the process for Bronny James. I hope LeBron doesn't. Listen, it's not like LeBron's retiring after this year. Like, he's turning 39. He's going to make it to 40. So don't rush your kid to the NBA. You're going to play with him. I think he'll play with him. But let him go and play 2 years in college or a year and 3/4 in college, because I think he needs it. I don't think he's a one and done. I think you're doing a disservice to your kid in a lot of ways if you're going to rush him after just 1 year or really 3/4 of a year.
So the first play that just makes your eyes pop up and you go, okay, I see whose kid this is, was the chase down block in the first half. And I will say, I thought it was interesting. Andy Enfield had him in on the last play of regulation. Now, that might have been because Dennis Rodman's kid had just fouled out.
Yeah.
which is another subplot. He's a transfer from Washington State, but they've trusted Bronny James enough to have him in on that last play of regulation. Had him in the first couple minutes of overtime as well. But then you do wonder about conditioning and is he ready to be in crunch time in game one for him?
Yeah, I think when we look at his season, obviously the trajectory is going to go up because, again, he's going to get more comfortable. His shot has gotten better over the last couple of years. But I think he's a piece. Unless somebody gets hurt, he's not playing minutes over Boogie Ellis. He's not playing him over the number one freshman, Isaiah Collier. He's not playing him over Kobe Johnson, who's an elite defender with more size. So I think he's going to be a role player, and I think he'll be a hell of a role player at that because, again, he impacts winning. The box score is never going to show up as like, oh, my God, he had, a double-double. That's just not going to be his role. But you just watch him and you can tell he's got the intangibles. And here's the biggest thing, Andy, that I don't think people talk about enough. And I've seen him for probably 3 or 4 years now. Like, his teammates really like playing with him.
Yeah.
Because he's not about himself, and he never has been about himself. He just kind of plays the game the way it's supposed to be played, makes the right play, right? He doesn't over dribble. You watch him. What does he do? He gets the ball. He moves the ball. So guys love playing with him because, again, he's not a guy looking for his.
Well, and I thought it was interesting. Like, you had the line of students wrapped around the Galen Center. Like, if you Googled USC basketball, it was all Bronny James stuff. And you do wonder how that affects, because like you said, Collier is a potential top 3 draft pick next year. Like, we're talking about guys that are in a little different place. I wonder if he hadn't had the heart issue, what would Bronny James have been coming into the season? Would he have been kind of a rotational off the bench role player, a starter? Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought.
Exact thing he is, and he's going to be. I don't think anything changes. I just think, again, he missed the first 8 games, and it might take him a little bit longer. You always want to see like that second game, right? Sometimes that first game is deceptive. It could be both ways, right? A guy could be overwhelmed, or he could play above, kind of above his talent level. I think this was kind of Bronny. I think, some games you're going to get 10, 12, 14 points out of him. Other games he's going to do this and score a few points and have, I said, if you had asked me what his numbers are going to be at the end of the year, I would have said like 6 to 8 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds a game, shooting 36% from 3. Again, just making his guys better. And again, that doesn't jump off the page as a one and done. But when you're LeBron's kid, does an NBA team, and I know you didn't get me on here to talk about this, and this is probably not what we even should be talking about after he makes his debut, but it is something that's interesting, is does an NBA team take him with the 15th pick?
You might get LeBron pick to sign with you out of that. Yeah.
If I'm Minnesota, here's one. All right, here's a great example.
All right.
If I'm the Boston Celtics, and I don't win it all this year, and I get to the NBA Finals, and I've got Tatum and Jaylen Brown and all these dudes, and I live in Boston.
Porzingis, yeah,
Porzingis and Drew Holiday, and you're like, all right, like with the 28th pick, would we burn it on Bronny James to get LeBron and have a chance for the next 2 years? Hell yes.
Hell
would.
Yes. That's exactly right. As well, and that, listen, sometimes membership has its privileges, but speaking of membership, let's talk about the University of Arizona Alumni Association, something you belong to, because your alma mater's team looks unbelievable. I was going to ask you what the best undefeated, the remaining undefeated teams is, but I think you were probably going to answer Arizona. So I do want to, like, what happened to Caleb Love on the trip from Chapel Hill to Tucson? Like, he's like a different guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, and I was super critical. How about this? So I said when they got him, I took him out of my top 25 because he was so tough to watch last year, and he didn't really guard. And, the offensive efficiency had never been great, right? He was a guy that was kind of an all or nothing type guy. And when he was he was unbelievable, as we saw in the Final Four run a couple years ago. Last year, he was just not very good. for the most part, more down than up. And again, my biggest problem was he did not guard. So he goes to Tucson, and the difference is now Tommy Lloyd has other dudes. And Caleb Love heard it too. He heard the skeptics, whether it was me, whether it was other people, that not a team player, didn't make people better, didn't guard, all this. But now he's got other guys like Jayden Bradley. If Caleb Love doesn't guard, he brings in Jayden Bradley, who's an elite athlete and defender coming off the bench, transfer from Alabama. He's got Kai Boswell, one of the best point guards in the country, running the team right now as a sophomore. So it's funny. So I was so harsh with him, Andy, that after the game, they beat Duke. And I actually went up to him and apologized after the game and said, hey, man,
that was the game in New York. He was awesome in that game too.
Yeah, Duke. It was a game at Duke.
It was at Cameron. You're right. Yeah. It was at Cameron.
Yeah. So I just, I felt like, again, but it's hard because I don't know how you feel about this, but I've asked other college players this, including Armando Bacot, not specifically about Caleb Love, but I said, you guys are making more money than I am, some of you right now. So am I allowed to be critical of you guys because you're quasi-pros? Yes. Some of you are really pros right now. And he said to me, absolutely. Bacot's like a breath of fresh air. And he said, absolutely. You can criticize me if I'm not playing well. You should criticize me because we are making money now. But I probably took it a little bit too far with Caleb Love. And I've been blown away by, again, the fact that Tommy Lloyd's kind of held him accountable. And he, in return, has responded and guarded consistently and been better and been more efficient. And I think it starts there. But, man, this Arizona team has balance. They've got depth. They've got a great mix of international guys and transfers, a lot of Keyshawn Johnson, kid who went to the national title game from San Diego State, comes in, and he's just an MFer defensively.
So let's go from one team that got bounced early in the NCAA tournament to another. And it's funny because in football, we just don't, and we may get this as the playoff comes in and talk about this, but I find it interesting. Like if you talk to the casual fan, the last thing they remember about Arizona or Purdue is how they left the NCAA tournament. But these are two of the best teams in the country again this season. Yeah. And like you go back to Virginia a few years ago where they get bounced by UMBC in the first round, come back and win the national title. Purdue playing very well, played a really fun game against Alabama on Saturday night where you had Zach Edey with 35 points, fouled out practically half of Alabama's team. Yeah. He was perfect from the free throw line. And then Sears for Alabama with 35. That was as good as it gets.
Yeah. And the crazy part is, Andy, next Saturday, I'll be there in Indiana. It's a double header. It's actually Kansas and Indiana at 12:30. And then I'm going to get my daughter in the car. She's a sophomore at Indiana right now. And we're going to shoot over to Purdue, Arizona in Indianapolis at Bankers Life. So,
wow.
1 versus 2 or 3, whatever you want to put Purdue, they're probably 3 behind Kansas. But, at this point, those are 2 of the best teams in the country. And I can't wait because Arizona has beaten Michigan State and Duke, 2 teams that aren't in the top 25 right now. Okay. So those are their 2 big wins. They blasted Wisconsin over the weekend. And Wisconsin, I think at the end of the day, is probably a top 25-ish team. This one, if they beat Purdue in Indy, okay, I'm ready to say you're clearly the best team in the country, and we do have a dominant team this year. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Purdue wins this game because, frankly, I think Braden Smith is a completely different player than he was last year in terms of confidence and his ability now to read ball screens and react quickly and not dribble out of it, but say, you know what, I'm open. They're backing off me because of Zach Edey. I'm going to shoot the hell out of the ball here, and I have confidence. This is a kid that people don't realize going into his freshman year, that whole summer, he had been hurt. So he missed that whole summer. So last year was almost like I was shocked he was as good as he was. First of all, he's tiny, or maybe not tiny, but he's small, and he missed all this time. So I think he's a completely different player this year. Bring in Lance Jones from Southern Illinois, who frustrates me at times because he takes some bonehead shots. But what he is a big, strong, athletic guard who's fearless and can really defend, right? So that helps them because they didn't really have that last year. But ultimately, listen, it comes down to how tight are they going to be in the first round of that tournament, and who do they go up against? And once you get through it, I was at that Virginia Gardner-Webb game, and they were tight, and they were rattled a little bit at halftime. It was close. And I remember talking to Kyle Guy and Ty Jerome after the game, and they admitted, they were like, yeah, we were nervous. And Purdue's going to be nervous. Matt Painter knows that. Zach Edey knows that. They all know that. But if they can get through that first one, I think then you kind of you exhale. And I think they'll get through it this year.
Well, let's talk about Zach Edey. Later in the show, we're going to be talking to Justin Hopkins, who works for our Oregon site, about Dillon Gabriel, who is a quarterback going from Oklahoma to Oregon. And Dillon Gabriel is one of those guys that I don't know that what he has in terms of an NFL future, but he's extremely valuable as a college football quarterback, which is why he went in the portal and is getting a good deal at Oregon. Yeah. Zach Edey, 7'3", feels like he's been basically kind of schemed out of the game that the NBA plays. Yeah. But he seems like he's still incredibly valuable in college.
Yeah, these bigs, man, it's just so different now because, again, you look at it 10 years ago and Jaleel Okafor was a top, 3 pick.
Yeah.
And now if he was, playing college basketball, he wouldn't be drafted. And if Zach Edey could have been drafted in the first round of the top 40, he probably would have been gone. Now he's making as much NIL as he would probably if he had, gone to the
been a second round pick. Yeah.
Yeah. Second round pick. Exactly. So in his opinion, and again, this is a kid you got to remember, just started playing basketball 6 years ago.
Yeah.
He grew up in Canada playing baseball, playing a little bit of hockey, but more of a baseball player, first baseman. And so he's getting better and better. Instinctively, he's getting better and better each year. And the one thing, it's funny because you look at Hunter Dickinson, who transferred from Michigan to Kansas, and Hunter has really been able to step out and make shots from 3. Okay, so what are the NBA? They're telling you as a big, right? You better be able to go out and be able to space it and make some shots from the perimeter. And then you better be able to guard ball screens, right? Because everybody wants to switch right now in the NBA. And if you can't guard, and Hunter, that's his probably bigger weakness right now. Zach Edey's gotten a lot better defensively, but Zach Edey is not going to step out. And I asked him about it a couple of weeks ago when I was down at West Lafayette. I said, why don't you step out and show people that you can make this shot? Because supposedly he can. Painter says that, and Edey says that a little bit. And he said, he's like, listen, I know where my bread is buttered. I know where my team needs me. I want us to win. And ultimately, honestly, if he's down there, Andy, he's drawing double teams. And there's a reason Braden Smith is wide open. Those guys should be making those threes on that team if they're decent shooters, because they're all uncontested threes, one after the other.
Wow. I'm excited because Zach Edey, Hunter Dickinson, them being back in college basketball again, it feels like NIL has made college basketball something closer to what we remember when we were kids, when there were people you remembered in the sport for 3 and 4 years, and it wasn't this continually changing cast of characters. Now, they might be moving teams like Caleb Love or Hunter Dickinson, but we know who they are, and we have a kind of a history with them.
Yeah, I mean, the bigs stick around. The guards and wings don't. And the other thing this year that's the last couple of years has been different is the freshman classes have been very, very underwhelming. Very underwhelming. And you'll see it with the NBA draft this year especially. There's nobody at the top. There's nobody you're like. Isaiah Collier's a nice player, as you watched tonight, but he struggled, and he's
not Brandon Miller from last year.
No, there's just nobody right now in this year's class or next year's class coming in that you're going to, other than Cooper Flagg. Cooper Flagg is the one guy you're going to tank for, but nobody, the Washington Wizards right now stink. The Pistons stink. And you feel bad because honestly, they're going to want to trade out of that number 1 pick, whoever gets it. Cause it's the type of pick that kind of, like Anthony Bennett that year when the Cavs got him, get you fired.
My God, I forgot about Anthony Bennett.
Yeah, it's Chris Grant, their GM, fired because, again, you can't win.
Yeah. Well, we always win when we have you on. Jeff Goodman, Field of 68. Read him at the Messenger. Thank you so much.
Thanks, my man. Appreciate it. Honored to be the first Hoops guest.
Well, we're going into hoops. We've dipped our toe in. Now we're going to start dipping the foot in.
Love it.
Thank you, Jeff. That's exactly right. Of course, we're going to have Joe Tipton from On 3. He's coming on Thursday. We got to talk about a big weekend in hoops next weekend. We talked about Purdue and Arizona with Jeff. They are playing next week in Indianapolis. Jeff's heading to that game. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is getting interesting now in college hoops. And look, we're going to have a little lull, but we got some bowl games too. Now, let's not forget about that. But there is still news happening in the transfer portal all the time. And the biggest news of the weekend was Dillon Gabriel, late of Oklahoma. Sorry, I got my O schools mixed up. Late of Oklahoma. He is going to Oregon. And I think, if you watched that Oregon offense with Bo Nix and you watched Dillon Gabriel in 2 seasons at Oklahoma, you're thinking, you know what? This guy looks like a really fun fit in this offense. And it's pretty exciting. But there is a little domino effect and a very intriguing secondary portal recruiting story to this. Justin Hopkins from ScoopDuck joins us to explain all of it. Welcome, Justin Hopkins of ScoopDuck, and it's been a very busy weekend for Justin. On Saturday, commitment from Dillon Gabriel, late of Oklahoma, late of UCF, now headed to Oregon, which, by the way, was the school he wanted to go to in the first place, Justin. He was going to go sign. All those Hawaii guys wanted to play for Oregon because of Marcus Mariota.
Yeah. No, and Dillon Gabriel, I think it made it well known that he wanted, this is the way he gets to end his career as he wants, right? He's more than likely going to compete, or be in the Heisman conversation, hopefully. And he gets to finish it at Oregon where he wanted to go all along. Pretty fun. Pretty fun. This is what makes college football fun, is these little stories like this.
And wearing Marcus Mariota's number. Like that.
Yeah.
It is amazing because he's such an influence on all those QBs that came out of Hawaii. And I'd imagine Oregon's a special place to all of them for that reason.
Yeah, he really did kind of pave the way, his success. And then you look at Marcus Mariota, the person, and everybody realizes, wow, this is a really awesome dude. He's just such a good person to his core, and he grew up that way. So I think a lot of these young men look up to him because of the person he is on the field, success he had at Oregon. And then man, this guy maybe hasn't had the NFL career that you'd hope for, but shoot, there isn't anybody in the world that doesn't root for Marcus Mariota because he's such a great guy.
Well, let's talk about Dillon Gabriel in this offense. So this is a little bit different than when Bo Nix got there, because Bo Nix got there, Kenny Dillingham was the OC. He and Kenny had worked together at Auburn before. They both knew each other pretty well. This is Will Stein and Dillon Gabriel, who don't have a history together. Gabriel, when he went to Oklahoma, was playing for his UCF OC. So This is a little bit new for him, but how does he fit into the offense they run?
Yeah, I think this offense sets up any quarterback for success if they understand the playbook, if they understand where everybody's supposed to be. I think that's what made Bo Nix just so efficient and made so few mistakes. He knew where every receiver was going to be. So he's making read one, read two, and all of a sudden, it's not there. I'll hit my check down, I haven't even looked at yet, but I know he's over here. Yeah. And I think that's what Will Stein's offense really does. It gives you options and almost always has something that's available to you if you don't force it. So, Bo Nix threw 2 interceptions this year, really only threw 1, but he did get, credited for a second. And I think that's what Dillon Gabriel has to do. Take what's there, okay? Don't try and push the ball, force it into these tight windows. It doesn't have to go downfield all the time. We know he's got an arm. I think the one thing he'll bring that maybe Oregon didn't utilize with Bo Nix, probably because of depth concerns, is the legs. Dillon Gabriel can run. I think we'll see that a little bit more in this offense. But, I know but you look at this Oregon offense, and as efficient as it was this year, there's no reason to change much.
No, and that's the thing. You've got a guy who has, similar ability to run to Bo Nix and has been known as a high-volume, very accurate, efficient passer throughout his time in college, which that's what Bo Nix was at Oregon. That's not what Bo Nix was at Auburn. So, we already know Dillon Gabriel can be that because he's been that at Oklahoma.
Yeah, it's almost like, Oregon and Dan Lanning very early, of course, ran the lab test and said, well, let's take a high volume guy, pretty decent completion percentage and see if we can work him into the offense. And of course, the Bo Nix experiment worked marvelously. And you look at Dillon Gabriel and his experience and what he's done at UCF and what he's done at Oklahoma and just his completion percentage, over 100 passing touchdowns, over 14,000 yards. You think, well, this is kind of the Bo Nix experiment reincarnated. It worked really well. Let's do it again. So, and he might, and I think Gabriel comes in even more polished than Bo Nix did when he transferred to Oregon 2 years ago.
So Gabriel commits on Saturday. Very quickly, there's a very cryptic post from Ty Thompson, who was the backup at Oregon under, when Bo Nix was there, a 5-star prospect. He actually was at Oregon before Bo Nix got there. And clearly it looks like, okay, I'm not getting the starting job. It shows him walking away past a row of Oregon helmets. And then on Sunday, he tells Pete Thamel from ESPN he is entering the transfer portal. So what was Ty Thompson's Oregon career like, and where do you think he's going to be looking at going?
Yeah, I mean, just to answer the first part, that his career, he was the guy everybody rooted for, right? He'd get out there and you'd want to see him play, and he'd make mistakes. And a lot of fans would say, okay, those weren't great mistakes, but Ty just needs more time. And I think because he stuck with the transition from Mario to Lanning, and Dillingham left, and you've got Will Stein in here, and like you said, Bo Nix came in. He's just been around the program a long time, and he's a pretty quiet guy, but always he's kept his nose clean, been a great team leader. Just a lot of fans love him, and it's the hard truth of college football, right? It's, with the transfer portal being created to help student athletes maybe find that greener pasture, it's also opened the doorway for it to be a business for coaches. They've got to win, and if these guys haven't produced in a certain amount of time, it's time to kind of have that conversation. And so for Ty, I guess to answer the second part, I don't really know where he goes because his body of work is just so unfinished, right? You don't know, like, he's a 5-star, but so far, what's he done at the collegiate level? Not a whole heck of a lot. Played some mop time and some cleanup time, and it hasn't always been the best, but you just kind of wonder, he's probably not getting a ton of reps. So if you make him the guy and you work on developing him, can he be that? I would immediately look at Kenny Dillingham at ASU.
Arizona State, which is where Ty is from. Ty is from Gilbert, Arizona, which is suburban Phoenix. So that's exactly what I was thinking, is if Kenny liked coaching him the year he coached him, that's an easy fit.
And I heard from sources while Kenny was here in that year that they just felt that to that point, Ty hadn't gotten a lot of development from previous coaches. And so they kind of felt like, okay, yeah, here's a guy who's been in the program a year or two, but is very much at a freshman level still from that standpoint because he just hasn't had the time to develop. So I think if you're, Kenny Dillingham, you maybe have I know we'll get into it, the Dante Moore talk with Ty. You say, hey, maybe I don't make you the starter this year, but come in and maybe in 2 years you're the guy. I don't know.
So you mentioned Dante Moore, who is one of the more interesting people in the transfer portal. So for those who don't know, we'll do the whole history. Dante Moore was a 5-star quarterback from Detroit. He was originally committed to Oregon. He then flipped to UCLA on signing day. He played some at UCLA this year, and now is back in the portal. And Michigan's a possibility right by home.
Yep.
Oregon's a possibility where he was originally committed. But in both cases, there's a veteran quarterback in the way, and he seems perfectly cool with that.
Unique is the word to use here, right? Because this is not typical of a quarterback going into the transport, especially somebody that's basically going to have every Power 5 school chasing him like Dante Moore does. And it really makes you maybe appreciate the level-headedness of his family, of who he's getting his advice from. Like, hey, maybe sitting for a year isn't bad. Okay, going and learning from a Dillon Gabriel, McCarthy, whoever, you're going to go learn from an experienced guy. And it's a unique way. And you look at kind of like looking back and you think, man, Dan Lanning might land Dillon Gabriel and Dante Moore in the same transfer period. That's unreal. And I do think that there's a little bit of a hint here that the Ty Thompson move really opens that door for Dante Moore.
Well, and the Dante Moore thing is very interesting because whether he winds up at Oregon or Michigan and winds up being the starter there as a third-year college player, that's kind of what would have happened had he signed with one of those schools out of high school.
Yeah.
But he did, it felt like the flip to UCLA was a chance to play because they weren't sure what they wanted. They had Ethan Garbers and Colin Schlee, and it looked like there was a chance, and he did get a chance to play. And I think what he learned was he may not be quite ready yet.
Yeah, I think I've been around because Chip Kelly was here at Oregon, and I've met him personally and talked to him. And he's always the smartest guy in the room. He really, like, you talk X's and O's on offense with Chip, and you're just like, I mean, and so if I was a quarterback and I was Dante Moore and Chip Kelly sat down and said, hey, here's what I'm going to do with you, and here's how the offense, you're like, wow, that I could do that. I could be successful there. And so I see that. I'm not saying he's sold him a raw bill of goods. We all still kind of envision Chip Kelly, the offensive mastermind, but I think maybe that window is past Chip a little bit, and others have caught up to that style of offense, at least from a defensive standpoint. I think if you're Dante Moore, you go back to the drawing board, you're looking at Oregon, you're looking at Michigan, you said, hey, they had a guy with a ton of success in an offense that works. I could learn that, and I could be that guy.
Yeah, it's interesting because usually with the 5-star QB, it doesn't matter. It's I'm going to go find where I can play, and that's it. And so this is a little different take on that. But let's talk about the 2023 Oregon team. Obviously, things did not end the way they wanted to in the Pac-12 championship game, but they've got one more game. They've got the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty. And it sounds like one very important outgoing player has decided he will play in this game.
Yeah, we've talked about Bo Nix already, and there's been a ton of talk about Bo Nix being in that Heisman Trophy presentation, a finalist there. But what kind of got swept under the rug is the fact that he's going to play in the Fiesta Bowl. He's, announced he'll come back and that he'll play. And it's just like, I don't know about you, but I love it. I mean, I understand why these guys make these business decisions and don't play them and get ready for the NFL. I totally get it, but it's refreshing. And I absolutely love it when somebody like Bo Nix does. And I think that this is something Dan Lanning has said, hey guys, look, didn't get the matchup we wanted, didn't make the playoffs like we wanted, but let's go out there and let's kick the crap out of Liberty in the Fiesta Bowl. And I believe he's that type of competitor. And I think that that's what he wants to do to kind of set the tone for this offseason. Again, having somebody like Bo Nix in your program is so valuable for what he leaves behind, the culture that he leaves behind. And I think, Dan Lanning's really trying to capitalize on that.
Well, Kyrie Jackson's announced he's going to opt out the cornerback, but I would imagine there's some guys that'll think about playing just because Bo Nix is playing.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a guy like Troy Franklin, who hasn't announced his intent or his decision yet on that. Terrence Ferguson, the tight end, could go both ways, is looking at the NFL, looking towards returning. Those are the guys that whatever decision they make, you might get them back to play. Hey, I want to play. Let's run it back one more time, Bo. I'd love to play with you one more time. So I think it could be kind of the cherry on top of the cake for what has been. I've done this a long time in covering Oregon specifically, and just the way Bo Nix carried himself and came in and really just revitalized this program on and off the field. Such a tremendous young man off the field. He's one of those guys you just gravitate to, and I love to see that it's kind of going to end this way for him. I'd love to see him win a Heisman, but this will still be fun.
Yeah, if he can go out a winner and have fun with his teammates, and you're right, he did, because that Mario leaving could have been such a crippling moment for the program. And I know everybody was scared because it did feel like, okay, another coach is leaving. But then you get Dan Lanning, Bo Nix comes in and really settles things down and kind of raises the level of play offensively to back what you guys in Eugene are used to watching. And it does feel like Oregon is a very sustainable program from here on out.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fork in the road moment. And you as a fans, I know that they're looking back and saying, oh, I'm glad Mario left. I'm glad you hear him say that. But at the time, everybody was scared to death. Like, Mario's leaving. Here's a fork in the road for Oregon. Which way are they going to go? Are they going to kind of go back to mediocrity, or are they going to take the next level? And then next thing you know, the guy that's showing up is, barely 30 years old and never been a head coach of a team before. So there's a lot of questions. Turns out he's really good at this. And it's been, like you said, Dan Lanning has done such a tremendous job identifying holes in the transfer portal and fixing them. Bo Nix is a perfect example of that. There's been Jordan Birch is another one, Kyrie Jackson, list goes on. And he has built a roster that will be able to compete year in and year out with a combination of portal additions and effective high school recruiting as well.
Well, and that's what's interesting so far. Other than Dillon Gabriel, it's a lot of Oregon players going out because they weren't playing very much. The question now is, where is Dan Lanning going to go in the portal to spot recruit to fill in holes. Oregon comes up whenever there's a big person in the portal because they got a good collective. They're very organized on that front. Where do you see him targeting position-wise?
So, a quarterback was going to be a big one, and it looks like that's at least halfway out of the way, if not all the way. You could just get Dillon Gabriel and be done. I think the next biggest one is safety. I think Oregon's got some concerns there at safety, and you can immediately point to that Pac-12 championship game. Washington was always a bad matchup for Oregon because their strong suits on offense, was Oregon's weaknesses on defense. So I think safety, you look for a body or two there. Depending on what Troy Franklin does, I assume he's going to the NFL. I think you need a couple of experienced guys there at wide receiver. I do believe they'll get Tez Johnson back. I do believe they'll get Trayshawn Holden back. Those are big wins for Dan Lanning to bring both those guys back, but you could use a little bit more help there. And then, of course, along with Dillon Gabriel visiting, Oregon brought in Walter Nolan, the number one player in the transfer portal, defensive lineman. Here's the deal as far as Dan Lanning goes in defensive lineman. He's always going to recruit him because he loves him. So Oregon's going to be in the game with those guys. And that's pretty much most of the needs. I've said this elsewhere, but it's going to be quality, not quantity for the transfer portal this year.
Well, there's only one Walter Nolan type in the portal right now. Maybe another one jumps in at some point, but there's only one like him right now. And Oregon does have to replace some D linemen who are, 6th and 7th year guys who, as great as they were, can't come back.
Yeah. You do have some holes there. I don't think he needs a ton of guys, but somebody to steady the ship more so in the interior of that defensive line versus the edges. And Walter Nolan's a really good replacement.
Well, we shall see. Division Street, the collective affiliated with Oregon, maybe we're cut out for you on that one. So, J-Hop, thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy.
That is Justin Hopkins from ScoopDuck.com, and we'll see what happens with Dillon Gabriel at Oregon. Will he become the 6th transfer quarterback since 2017 to win the Heisman? That's right, 5 transfer quarterbacks since 2017 have won the Heisman Trophy. The latest, of course, Jayden Daniels, who won it over the weekend. Congratulations to Jayden Daniels of LSU on the Heisman Trophy. You want to know how I voted? I am a Heisman voter. Well, the top 3 were Jayden Daniels, Michael Penix Jr., and Bo Nix, and that is exactly how my ballot went this year. So I had Jayden number 1, Penix number 2, and Bo Nix number 3. We have a big week for you. Obviously, we got the transfer portal. We are very close to signing day. National Signing Day is a week from Wednesday, so I imagine there'll be a Josh Newberg appearance on the show. Also, we're going to start previewing bowls. There are 5 bowl games on Saturday. 5! Chris Vanini of The Athletic is going to join us as our special guest picker because we are going to start picking bowl games. Not all of them. We're going to portion it out. But on Monday's show, we're going to pick 6 bowl games because, man, it's that time of year. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Okay, I won't sing anymore. I promise. But yes, bowl games are coming. And we will talk to you on Monday night.